The day humanity first encountered the Vlerith was supposed to be a celebration, a moment of historical significance, where Earth could stand proudly among the stars, heralding the beginning of a new era of interstellar cooperation. But the silence that filled the United Nations General Assembly as the Vlerith emissary entered the room was unnerving. To the thousands of representatives, diplomats, and world leaders gathered, this wasn't just a moment of curiosity, it was the harbinger of something far greater. The Vlerith were a species of towering, sinewy beings, with skin that shimmered like burnished metal, their eyes glowing a soft, unsettling violet. Their history stretched back eons, and they had long since conquered and integrated dozens of civilizations. Their arrival was meant to be a diplomatic one, a gesture of peace, or so it seemed. General Kate Miller, commander of the Earth Defense Forces, sat at the back of the room, her hands folded tightly in front of her. She had seen the footage of their ship as it entered Earth's orbit. A massive construct, a black monolith that seemed to absorb light, casting a shadow over the city below. To her, the ship spoke of power, alien, unrelenting power. The Vlerith's reputation preceded them, and the stories of their conquests were the stuff of legends. She had no illusions about what their presence meant. The Vlerith were not here to offer peace out of benevolence. They were here to evaluate humanity, to see if Earth would be a valuable asset to their empire, or if it would be crushed under their boot. The Vlerith emissary, Zorith, made his way to the podium, his movements calculated and precise. His voice, when he spoke, was deep and resonant, though there was a coldness in it, a calculated detachment that made it clear that this was no ordinary diplomatic meeting. Esteemed leaders of Earth, Zorith began, his words transmitted in dozens of languages simultaneously. We, the Vlerith, have observed your species for many cycles. Your planet is rich in resources, and your species has shown potential. We are prepared to offer you the opportunity to join the Vlerith Empire. There was a pause, a breath held across the room. The translation continued. In return for your compliance, we offer you protection, technology, and the benefits of our empire. However, we will first conduct an analysis of your species to determine your value. Our first step will be to analyze your genetic structure. The words hung in the air like a thick fog. General Miller felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She exchanged a glance with Dr. Julian Torres, a leading geneticist who had been tasked with studying the Vlerith's technology and their intentions. His brow furrowed, his usual calm demeanor replaced by an almost palpable unease. We have already begun our scans, Zorith continued, his tone measured and indifferent. We expect to understand your strengths and weaknesses. You will be notified when the process is complete. Miller could feel the weight of his gaze, though the alien's expression remained unreadable. He was already sizing them up, probing for weakness. It was a subtle but unmistakable warning. The Vlerith had no need to ask for permission. They were simply going through the motions of courtesy. The representatives murmured among themselves. Some looked hopeful, eager at the prospect of joining an empire with such vast knowledge and power. Others, including Miller, felt the looming threat of subjugation. The choice was not one of mutual respect. It was an ultimatum. Conform or be left behind. Zorith finished his speech, leaving the room in a tense silence. As the Vlerith delegation withdrew, the weight of the decision loomed larger. Miller watched them leave, every instinct telling her that this would not end well for humanity. The next few days were a blur of hurried meetings, tense debates, and urgent analyses. Miller found herself in constant consultation with Dr. Torres and other top experts. The genetic scans had been completed, and the results were both surprising and disturbing. Dr. Torres, who had spent years studying human genetics, had expected the Vlerith to find weaknesses in humanity's DNA, traits that could be exploited for biological warfare or control. Instead, the Vlerith had found something completely unexpected. "Look at this, General," Torres said, pulling up a holographic display of the human genome. He highlighted a section of DNA, a pattern that seemed unremarkable at first glance. "This is a sequence that we've never fully understood. No one has. But the Vlerith were able to extract it in their scans. What they didn't realize is that it's a genetic trait we've been evolving for millennia. Miller leaned in closer, her brow furrowed. What do you mean, evolving? Torres ran a finger across the display, highlighting a series of markers. It's not just a weakness. It's resilience, adaptability. What the Vlerith see as vulnerability is actually humanity's greatest strength. This DNA sequence allows us to adapt to changing environments at a rate that no other species we've encountered can. It's a survival mechanism, but on a scale they never anticipated. Miller was silent for a moment, processing the implications. So they're scanning us for weaknesses, and instead, they've found weapons. Exactly, Torres confirmed, his eyes bright with excitement. These traits could give us the ability to resist their biological weapons or even fight back against their control in ways they haven't thought possible. But there was a catch. The Vlerith had also scanned human DNA for any other weaknesses, and they had found some. Human vulnerability to disease, the tendency toward internal conflict, and other genetic flaws were all present. The Vlerith would likely use this information to their advantage, figuring out how to manipulate humanity's imperfections. It would be up to Earth's leaders to make a difficult decision, to fight back or to submit. As the days passed, the global reaction to the Vlerith grew more complicated. Some world leaders, eager to secure the technological and military advantages of the Vlerith alliance, pushed for cooperation. They argued that submission was the only way to survive, that resistance was futile. Others, however, like General Miller, argued that humanity's resilience could be used to their advantage. If they could learn to harness their unexpected genetic strengths, they might have a chance to fight back. The UN convened a special session to address the Vlerith offer. The debate was heated, and the world's power dynamics were put on full display. Military leaders wanted to escalate their defenses, while scientists like Torres saw the potential for a new kind of warfare, one based on human adaptability. In the midst of this, Miller found herself increasingly distrustful of the Vlerith's true intentions. The alien species had done nothing to prove they were trustworthy. Everything they had offered thus far felt like a calculated move, a way to observe and manipulate. Miller's instincts told her they were planning something darker. It was in the middle of one of these strategy sessions, just as the world's leaders debated the merits of compliance, that the first real threat was revealed. A secure military base in the Arctic was attacked by an unknown force. Satellite footage confirmed the presence of Vlerith forces, vast, intricate drones that were unlike anything humanity had seen before. Their intent was clear: humanity's defensive capabilities were insufficient. That was the moment the tone of the war room shifted. The quiet before the storm was over. The first strike had been made. General Kate Miller, standing before the United Nations Security Council, her face taut with resolve, finally spoke the words that would define her leadership in the days to come. We will not yield. Humanity will not bow to alien conquerors. If they think we are weak, they are gravely mistaken. There was no turning back now. The Vlerith had miscalculated. Humanity's strength wasn't in their genetics alone. It was in their spirit, their unyielding will to survive, and to fight for their future. And soon, the Vlerith would learn that lesson the hard way. You said. The night was still, but the tension was palpable. In the days following the Vlerith attack on the Arctic base, the world had shifted from disbelief to state of constant alert. The UN Security Council convened again, but this time, the debate wasn't about diplomacy or offers of peace. The question now was survival. General Kate Miller stood at the head of the table, surrounded by the world's top military strategists. A large holographic map of Earth's defenses projected in front of them, with the locations of key military installations and the recent strike zones highlighted in red. The Arctic base was a smoldering ruin, and satellite imagery confirmed the attack was carried out by advanced Vlerith drones, seemingly autonomous, with the ability to adapt to environmental conditions faster than any known human technology. They're probing us, Miller said, her voice steady but grim. Testing our defenses, gauging our reactions. And they've learned everything they need to know. Dr. Julian Torres stood off to the side, his fingers hovering above a display showing the results of the Vlerith genetic scans. He had spent the last few days analyzing their findings, What they had expected to be a simple genetic cataloging turned into something much darker. They hadn't just studied human biology, they had used it as a map, finding vulnerabilities to exploit. This isn't just about our physical weaknesses, Torres added, turning to face the room. The Vlerith are after something much deeper. They're going to target our social and psychological weaknesses, our divisions. They've already identified potential fault lines, economic disparity, political unrest, even cultural divisions. They'll use these against us. General Miller's brow furrowed. She had always known that the Vlerith were a species built on manipulation, but this new information was worse than she'd feared. The aliens had learned everything about humanity, our strengths and weaknesses, down to our core. And now, they would use that knowledge to break us apart. So, what do? Asked one of the other military leaders, General Armand from France, his tone edged with frustration. Do we submit? Do we try to talk with them, make another offer? They're already attacking our outposts. No, Miller replied firmly. We do not submit. But neither do we go in blind. We need to prepare. We need to use our adaptability, the very thing the Vlerith underestimated about us, to fight back. If we're going to survive, we'll need more than just weapons. We'll need a strategy they won't see coming. Back at the Earth Defense Forces Central Command, Miller and her team pored over the latest intelligence reports. The Vlerith were relentless, their drone swarms now appearing near other strategic locations. Each attack seemed carefully calculated, targeting not only military sites but also infrastructure that could fracture humanity's ability to function cohesively. Their strikes were precise, surgical, designed to confuse and scatter humanity's defenses. As the night wore on, Miller grew more convinced that they had to make a bold move. But that move had to be based on human strengths, not just brute force. The Vlerith had underestimated humanity's resilience, its creativity, and its unpredictability. They thought they could map human weaknesses and apply the same strategies that had worked across dozens of other species. They didn't understand that humanity's greatest weapon was its ability to think outside the box, to adapt quickly, to surprise even the most powerful adversary. What if we hit them where they least expect it? Miller muttered, more to herself than anyone else. What if we find a way to disrupt their technology, their perfect calculations? Something they can't predict. Dr. Torres, who had been silent for some time, turned to her. What do you mean? You're talking about hacking their systems, aren't you? Miller nodded. Yes. But not just their military systems. We've seen their advanced algorithms. They anticipate our moves, calculate every possible outcome. But they don't account for the human element. If we can somehow tap into their network, introduce a degree of randomness, we can disrupt their strategy. We need to throw their algorithms off balance. If we give them something they can't predict, they'll lose their advantage. Torres considered it. You're suggesting we use our own unpredictability against them, create chaos in their plans? Exactly, Miller said. We need to fight them on a psychological level. They're relying on their advanced intelligence and their ability to control everything. If we can take that away, they'll have to rethink their approach. As the plan began to take shape, it became clear that Earth's greatest strength wasn't its technology or firepower, it was its people. Throughout history, humanity had faced seemingly insurmountable odds and found a way to survive. It was in the collective human spirit, the ability to unite when it seemed impossible, to improvise, to act without logic and still make it work. This was what would give them a chance. The next few days were a whirlwind of preparation. Miller and Torres worked together to refine the plan, pulling in experts from every corner of the world. The goal was to infiltrate the Vlerith's systems, introduce a wave of chaotic, unpredictable data, disrupt their communication networks, scatter their drones, and create enough confusion to give Earth's forces a fighting chance. But it wasn't just about technology. It was about human nature itself. Miller reached out to the world's leaders, calling for a unified front. It wasn't just a military response. It was a call to every citizen, every community, to stand together. The message was clear. Humanity's strength lay in its unity, in its ability to think and act independently. They would have to outsmart the Vlerith, and that meant every person on Earth had to be ready to contribute in some way. Despite the growing sense of urgency, there were still those who believed that cooperation with the Vlerith was the only viable path. Dr. Rajiv Singh, an influential Indian diplomat, spoke publicly about the advantages of aligning with the Vlerith. Their technology is far beyond ours. If we could join their empire, we could ensure our survival and improve our civilization. Why fight when we can embrace the future? His words echoed across the globe, gaining traction among those who feared the cost of war. The notion of submitting to the Vlerith's rule wasn't just appealing to the fearful, it was seductive. The Vlerith's technology promised to cure diseases, extend lifespans, and elevate human society to unimaginable heights. But there was a darker edge to it all: subjugation, control, the loss of autonomy. Miller knew that the Vlerith didn't offer peace. They offered assimilation, and that was something no one could afford to accept. Back in the war room, General Miller watched the live feed of Singh's speech, her expression hardening. "We don't have time for idealism," she said. "We fight for freedom, for humanity's future. We cannot let them convince the world that submission is the only way forward." The first major counteroffensive took place in the Pacific, where Earth's unified military forces struck at the heart of the Vlerith's advance. The plan was risky, attempting to outmaneuver their drone swarms by using human unpredictability as a weapon. The drones were highly adaptive, but the attack wasn't meant to be a conventional military strike. Instead, it was a diversion, an attempt to overload the Vlerith algorithms with chaotic patterns. Miller watched as the operation unfolded. In real time, the human forces began executing their strategy. Instead of following predictable military tactics, they threw the Vlerith off by changing their approach constantly: fake retreats, surprise ambushes, false signals, all designed to confuse the Vlerith's tracking systems. At first, it seemed like a fool's errand. The Vlerith adapted quickly, but they were clearly frustrated. They couldn't predict what humanity would do next. For every move they made, humans responded in ways that didn't fit the aliens' carefully calculated models. Then, as the Vlerith drones stumbled, Miller knew they had a chance. The Vlerith were beginning to lose their precision. For the first time, the human element, the unpredictability, was winning. But even as the tide began to shift, Miller knew that this was just the beginning. The Vlerith were only growing more determined, and their next strike would be even more brutal. The calm that had come with the initial success of the counteroffensive was fleeting. In the distance, the darkness of space seemed to loom ever closer, the Vlerith's full wrath yet to be unleashed. Humanity had struck back, but would it be enough to hold their ground? The horizon was darkening, and the storm was just beginning. "You said." The sky above was a bruised purple, and the air was thick with tension. The Vlerith had retreated, temporarily. After the surprise success of Earth's first counteroffensive, the alien invaders had begun pulling back their drone swarms. It wasn't a victory, not yet, but it was something to build on. Humanity had proven that unpredictability could break even the most sophisticated algorithms, and for the first time since the invasion began, General Kate Miller allowed herself a breath of cautious hope. But that hope was fleeting. The Vlerith were too calculating, too intelligent to be defeated so easily. They would adapt. They would come back with a vengeance. A new kind of war. The command center was alive with activity as Miller pored over the latest intel. The Vlerith hadn't fully retreated. They were recalibrating, analyzing the data, and preparing for their next strike. But something had changed. They were beginning to understand that their previous methods weren't enough. The alien forces were now targeting key cities across the globe, choosing not just military sites, but population centers that were crucial for morale and unity. "We're not just fighting drones anymore," Miller said, speaking to her top lieutenants and strategists. "They've realized that the human spirit is harder to quantify than we thought. They're targeting the places that matter most. The heart of humanity." Dr. Julian Torres stood beside her, his face tense as he scanned the reports. "They've figured out that breaking our spirit could be more effective than any weapon they've deployed. We're not just dealing with physical warfare now. They're attacking our will to fight." Miller nodded grimly. The Vlerith had underestimated humanity's ability to endure, but now they had learned a valuable lesson. They were no longer just testing military defenses. They were probing humanity's psyche, searching for cracks in the collective resolve. They're going to strike our major cities, Torres continued, his voice low. But it's not about destruction. Not entirely. They want to create panic, division. They want us to turn on each other. If we can't stand united, we'll fall. The idea was simple, but chilling. The Vlerith wanted to use humanity's diversity, its fractured systems, against it. They would sow fear, chaos, and distrust among Earth's nations, all while slowly dismantling the physical and psychological infrastructure that made humanity strong. Then we'll show them what it means to unite, Miller said, her voice hardening with resolve. The price of unity. The Vlerith strike came within days. It was swift and brutal, simultaneous assaults on major cities in North America, Europe, Asia, and Africa. Their drones hit critical infrastructure first: communications, transportation, power grids, leaving chaos in their wake. What followed was far worse. Vlerith bioengineered weapons, specifically designed to manipulate human emotions, were unleashed on the populations. These were not just physical weapons but psychological ones, capable of amplifying fear, anxiety, and paranoia to a catastrophic degree. Miller watched in horror as images flooded her screen, people in major cities turning on each other in confusion and terror, mass panic spreading like wildfire. It was exactly as Torres had predicted. The Vlerith's strategy was not just military but psychological. They weren't just conquering, they were dismantling humanity's very sense of unity. The war room became a flurry of frantic activity. Military leaders scrambled to contain the chaos, but the damage was done. Humanity's greatest strength, the bond of cooperation, was fracturing. Each new report of violence, each new outbreak of panic, drove the point home. The Vlerith were not just invading Earth. They were trying to break its soul. Where are the countermeasures? Miller demanded. We knew this was coming. Torres stepped forward, his expression grim. We've been testing human resilience. The psychological weapons they deployed, they're exploiting our weaknesses. Fear of the unknown, distrust of others. But we have something they didn't count on. Humanity's ability to fight through adversity. We've just got to remind people who we are. Miller's mind raced. She knew the stakes. But she also knew that in the face of this unprecedented attack, the one thing the Vlerith didn't understand was the way humans would fight when pushed to the brink. It wasn't just about technology or brute strength, it was about the fire that burned inside, the unrelenting will to survive. She turned to her officers. We need a plan now. We have to restore some semblance of order, but we can't let them see us broken. We fight back, against the drones, against the fear. We'll show the world that no matter how much they try to divide us, we will stand together. Human resilience, the heart of the resistance. Within hours, the call went out. The global resistance was born, not out of sheer might, but out of necessity and hope. Governments, military forces, independent militias, and even civilian groups began to organize. People who had once seen each other as enemies or strangers now stood together, united by a singular purpose: survival. While world leaders scrambled to coordinate counterattacks, people took to the streets, resisting the Vlerith's psychological weapons. In cities ravaged by chaos, grassroots movements formed. They began to fight back using what the Vlerith could not control: human ingenuity and the power of community. In Paris, a group of scientists and hackers led a rebellion, using their knowledge of digital systems to disrupt the Vlerith's communication networks. In New York, a band of former military personnel and civilians worked together to protect critical infrastructure and restore order in the chaos of the streets. Even in Africa, where resources were limited, farmers and engineers created makeshift defenses to protect their villages from alien invaders. The human spirit, so often underestimated by the Vlerith, was proving to be a force that could not be easily crushed. The turning point. It wasn't just about resistance anymore. Humanity was beginning to fight back, not just in the streets, but in the air and in space. Miller watched as humanity's military forces launched a series of tactical strikes on Vlerith drone bases, using modified human technology and countermeasures designed to exploit weaknesses in the alien drone systems. For the first time, the Vlerith were forced to retreat, not because of their own mistakes, but because humanity had adapted faster than they expected. The aliens had underestimated one crucial aspect of human nature: the relentless drive to persevere. No matter how much destruction the Vlerith wrought, humanity refused to surrender. Instead, it rose from the ashes, more united than ever. At the heart of this growing resistance was a realization that had begun to dawn across the globe. The Vlerith were not invincible. They had the power of advanced technology, yes, but humanity had something they didn't. The fire that burned inside every human soul, the ability to turn despair into hope, to turn fear into action, was a force more powerful than any weapon. "We can do this," Miller said quietly, as a map of the world flickered in front of her, showing the tide of the battle slowly shifting in humanity's favor. "We're not just fighting back. We're proving that we are more than they thought we could be." A glimmer of hope. As the resistance grew stronger, so did the coordinated attacks on the Vlerith's technological infrastructure. In the Pacific, the human fleet launched a daring assault on one of the Vlerith's flagship motherships. In Africa, a newly formed coalition of nations used a series of guerrilla tactics to dismantle alien supply lines. The Vlerith began to realize that Earth wasn't just a planet to be conquered, it was a planet that would fight for its survival. In the quiet moments of victory, as the resistance pushed the Vlerith forces back, Miller allowed herself a small smile. It was a hard-fought, brutal battle, but humanity was proving something to the aliens, and to itself. The Vlerith had scanned human DNA for weaknesses, and found weapons. But what they couldn't have predicted, what they could never have accounted for, was the unbreakable bond that formed when humans were pushed to their limits. The fire that fueled them was unstoppable. And now, for the first time, the Vlerith were learning what it meant to face a species that would never give up. But the war was far from over. The Vlerith would return, and humanity would have to fight even harder. But for the first time, Miller felt something the Vlerith would never understand: hope. Humanity had only just begun to fight back. "You said." The Earth had not been this united in centuries. In the wake of humanity's unexpected rally against the Vlerith, the once fragmented global community had found itself not just fighting for survival, but for its soul. From the ashes of the chaos, human ingenuity, adaptability, and sheer will had forged an unbreakable front. Every corner of the planet felt the tension of the fight, but a quiet defiance now echoed in every corner. Humanity had something the Vlerith would never understand: a fierce, unyielding spirit. But despite the unity and strength that had bloomed across the world, there was still one brutal truth that everyone was grappling with: the Vlerith were not going to give up. The alien invaders had regrouped, recalibrated their approach, and prepared for their final assault. The previous setbacks had not diminished their resolve. Instead, they had sharpened their strategy. The Vlerith had learned from their mistakes and were now preparing for a confrontation that would decide Earth's fate. The calm before the storm. General Kate Miller stood on the balcony of the Earth Defense Council's command center, looking out over a city that was once again becoming a symbol of defiance. New York, a city ravaged by alien drones and then rebuilt by its inhabitants, was now a fortress. Makeshift walls had been erected along its streets, and every available weapon had been put to use. Satellite data streamed into her holographic display, showing Vlerith motherships moving into position in orbit, while ground forces prepared for the final wave of attacks. "This could be it," said Dr. Julian Torres, stepping up beside her. His face, usually calm and analytical, now wore the weight of knowing the stakes. "The Vlerith are preparing to launch everything they have. They want to end this now." Miller turned to him, her face hardening with resolve. "We won't let them. We're going to hit them with everything we've got. We've spent the last few months learning their strategies, adapting to their technology. Now, we make them pay for underestimating us." Torres nodded. "But they've adapted too. We need to be careful. If we don't disrupt their control over their drone armies, we could be wiped out." Miller's mind raced. The Vlerith had an undeniable technological superiority, but their greatest weakness, just as they had discovered with humanity, was their inability to account for the unpredictable. Humanity had learned to fight not just with weapons, but with ideas, with creativity, with chaos. "There's one thing they haven't figured out yet," Miller said, a spark of determination in her eyes. "They don't know how much humanity can endure." The final plan. The human resistance had found an unexpected ally in the fight. The very technology the Vlerith used to control their drones had been infiltrated by Earth's best minds. The Vlerith's communication network had been compromised by a series of daring cyberattacks led by underground hacker groups and military intelligence. The chaos they had sown among their systems had begun to take its toll. The Vlerith had stopped being an invincible force and were now reeling from humanity's ingenuity. But that advantage was slipping away. The Vlerith were preparing to launch a final offensive, a coordinated strike that would wipe out Earth's military capabilities in one fell swoop. The clock was ticking. Miller met with the Joint Task Force, an assembly of the world's top military leaders, strategists, and experts in alien technology. The holographic map displayed the Vlerith's final fleet positioning, dozens of warships and drones in orbit above Earth, ready to descend and overwhelm the planet's remaining defenses. The next few hours would decide everything. "We have one shot at this," Miller said, standing at the front of the room. "We've already shown them that we're more unpredictable than they can handle. But now we need to hit them where it hurts most, their central command. If we can take out their motherships and disrupt their network once and for all, we can turn the tide of this war." She turned to Torres. "You've been working on the disruption code. Is it ready?" Torres hesitated, but then nodded. "Yes. It's a long shot, but I believe we can infiltrate their command center, overload their control systems, and shut down their drones for good. We'll need a team on the ground to deploy a virus directly into their mothership systems." Miller's eyes narrowed. The plan was risky, dangerous, perhaps the most dangerous operation humanity had ever attempted. But it was their best chance. "We'll need a strike force. Fast, precise, and lethal. No room for error." The assault begins. Hours later, Miller stood alongside the elite strike force, her heart pounding in her chest. The mission was simple in concept but impossible in execution. Infiltrate the Vlerith motherships, deploy the virus, and disable their control networks. If successful, it would leave the Vlerith forces without direction, an army of drones without a master. It was humanity's best hope of winning the war. Miller and the team of soldiers were transported to a remote location in the Pacific, where the Vlerith's motherships had positioned themselves to begin their final bombardment. Under cover of darkness, the human forces launched a rapid assault. Speed was their advantage. They would strike fast, and they would strike hard. With the Vlerith focused on Earth's surface, they wouldn't expect a counteroffensive in the upper atmosphere. The strike force moved in as one. They stormed the landing sites where Vlerith drones were being deployed, neutralizing key targets with precision strikes. In moments, they were at the motherships. The large ships loomed ominously in space, their sleek forms illuminated by the glow of distant stars. Every movement felt like it could be their last. Miller's team breached the first mothership's defenses, alien turrets that fired without warning. The noise of gunfire echoed through the silent expanse of space as the team pushed forward. Miller's eyes scanned the walls of the mothership, watching as Torres's team plugged into the alien systems. The virus code was uploaded. "Virus is in," Torres confirmed over comms. "We're in their network now, but they'll know we're here soon." "Then let's make it count," Miller said, her voice hard with determination. The moment the virus entered the mothership's central systems, chaos erupted. The drones that had once moved in perfect formation now faltered, their movements erratic, confused. The motherships began to lose their cohesion as the Vlerith's once synchronized control systems malfunctioned. What had once been a precise, deadly force was now a disjointed swarm. But the Vlerith weren't going to go down easily. The last-ditch defense was initiated, and the motherships retaliated. As laser fire lit up the dark expanse, Miller and her team fought back with everything they had. Each step felt like an eternity as the team fought their way deeper into the alien craft, determined to finish the mission. The final push. Miller felt the tension in her muscles, the exhaustion weighing her down as they neared the heart of the mothership's command center. With Torres at the helm of the operation, the virus had begun to spread. It was working. The Vlerith drones had lost their cohesion. But as the virus activated, the mothership retaliated with a devastating countermeasure, an EMP that sent waves of shock through their equipment, knocking out systems across the ship. "Get the damn virus into the core," Miller ordered, gritting her teeth.
Now.
Torres worked quickly, his fingers flying over alien interfaces, deploying the last of the virus into the mothership's central core. The battle reached its apex as the ship began to destabilize, its internal systems slowly frying under the weight of the human ingenuity that had infiltrated its core. "We're done," Torres said with a satisfied breath. "It's over." The aftermath. As the motherships fell silent, Miller's team made their way back to Earth's command center. The fight was not over, but the tide had shifted. The Vlerith's control over their drone army was broken, and humanity's strategic advantage had tipped. The aliens had underestimated the human spirit, their belief in the unexpected, the unpredictable, and the undying will to survive. When the news broke of the Vlerith mothership's collapse, it spread like wildfire. Cities that had been in the grip of fear began to stir with hope. The fight wasn't over, but humanity had delivered a blow that the Vlerith couldn't have anticipated. In the aftermath, as Earth began to rebuild, General Miller stood before a new generation of soldiers and civilians, united, stronger than ever. The final victory was within reach, and humanity had proven what the Vlerith had failed to understand. When it came to resilience, adaptability, and the unyielding fight to protect what mattered most, humanity was truly unstoppable. The Vlerith had scanned human DNA for weaknesses and found weapons. Weapons that no invader could ever conquer.